Hey guys, so today I am going to just quickly show you the next step in our pop art paper mache sculptures, which is actually adding the paper mache. So once you have formed your food, whatever that may be, mine is a double scoop ice cream cone, with the bags and the tape, the next step would be to start to paper mache it. Okay, so a couple of things that you need for the paper mache. The first thing that you guys need is you're going to need mats for underneath, and you're probably going to need more than one since they are giant food sculptures. But paper mache is a very, very messy process, so definitely have mats for underneath, whether you're choosing to work on the table or the floor, whatever space you're working with, just make sure you have mats for underneath that space. The next thing is, I know that you guys made some paper mache mix in Mrs. Rodriguez's room for the piñatas for Spanish. Now, I don't know how you guys made that, but I actually do have a paper mache mix. So this is really, really easy. You just mix a very little bit of this, and it's like a powder, almost like flour, with some cold water and mix it up until it has a consistency like this, so it's not too thick and not too thin to where it's dripping. So this kind of thickness, almost like glue or paste, is the correct thickness that you're looking for, and you want to mix it so that there's no more bumps. And again, I could give you one of these little containers, and you just mix a little bit of powder with some cold water from the sink. All right, and you can use a brush to do this as well so that you don't get your hands all messy. All right, the next thing that you will need is some newspaper. Newspaper or magazine, doesn't really matter what, doesn't matter what words are on it, does not matter what pictures are on it, because you are going to paint over the paper mache once it is dry anyway, so you just need magazine. Now, for me personally, I find it easier to cut into strips rather than to rip into strips, just because I have more control over the strips that I am creating if I'm using a scissor. Okay, now when it comes to actually paper macheing our sculpture, since it is food and some of the food that we are making isn't exactly like a perfect form, like a perfect sphere or a perfect cone, it helps if your paper bags are really well taped into place. The better taped into place that each of the parts of your food are, the easier it's going to be to throw that paper mache on top, okay? If they're not well taped and it's kind of sloppy, then it's gonna be more difficult for you in the paper mache process. So I would just, before you even start to paper mache, really quickly just go in, double check, make sure that everything is the correct shape and form that you want it to be, and that it's very well held into place with the tape. Okay, so then I'm just gonna cut some strips of the newspaper to show you how to do this. And it doesn't matter what size, so if you're more comfortable using smaller pieces or smaller strips, that's totally up to you. Now, paper mache is a pretty messy process, and no matter how you do this, you're going to have to wash your hands at the end. But to minimize some of that mess, for me, what I'm doing is I'm actually using the paintbrush to apply the paper mache to the newspaper on both sides instead of dipping the whole thing in with my hands. This is just gonna make it a little bit less messy. It still will get on your hands, but this will save you a little bit. So you apply a generous amount, that means kind of a lot, to both sides of your paper mache, and then you're kind of just starting to layer it on, keeping with your form. So as you can see, I kind of already worked on the cone a little bit. I'll probably add one more layer on top of that, but I did already start to work on the cone. Now I'm working on my first scoop of ice cream. So I'm just cutting into strips, ripping into strips, whichever you're more comfortable with, layering the paper mache on both sides, the paste on both sides of it, and then just layering it on. Now I already have the whole shape of my ice cream and everything, so this part is actually pretty easy because you're just layering on one or two layers of the paper mache on the newspaper and onto your food. Okay, Again, both sides of it. Now, not every single person in the room is going to have their own thing of these because I only have so many of them. So what you can do is you can share with a partner or somebody else at your table to make it a little bit easier. That way we don't waste any of the paper mache mix, or it's a little bit less cleanup at the end. And you're just going to keep cutting, ripping into strips, applying the paper mache, and layering on, keeping with your shape and form. So when you put it on, you don't want to just slap it on and that's it. You want to kind of press it because you're trying to mold it into that same form that you had. Now, this is a ice cream scoop, so I want to keep with that shape of the sphere for the 2 scoops. All right, and I just continue to do this until I have my whole entire thing covered. If any area is not covered, feel free to layer the paper mache so that it does get covered. You want all of your space covered on here. Okay, and that's pretty much it. And then I'm not finished with this just yet, but once I am done, all I have to do then is make sure I thoroughly wash my brush and this container out, because if I don't wash the brush, then the paper mache is going to dry on there and I'm not going to be able to use that brush anymore. I can put my sculpture by the drying rack or anywhere else I tell you to put it, probably by the windows or something, to dry so that next week we can actually start to paint it. And that is all.